start. You're pro.
Okay.
It's yours. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. The great thing about this being an intimate group is we can have some great conversation today. So my plan is to go through slides as fast as possible. And you can stop me if I go too fast and ask those questions, because the questions are the best part. So, let's see. Hi, it's us.
I'm Dori Kelner. I'm a managing partner at Sleight of Hand Studios, and I met Ruby through the Drupal Diversity Inclusion group, and Ruby is one of the leaders of that team, and I've been involved with them for a couple of years now, and felt pretty passionate about the topic at hand, and having the opportunity to have a conversation with the Washington, D.C. group.
Cool. Yeah, and I'm Ruby Sinreich. I helped get the diversity inclusion group started a couple years ago when we got all excited at DrupalCon New Orleans, and we're like, we got to keep working on this. And we're going to tell you a ton more about what the diversity and inclusion initiative is. First, we're going to talk about more of the issues at hand, and we'll have our contact information at the end again too. So you can see it here too.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. So we all know that diversity is the right thing to do. And from a human perspective, we should care about the other people that we work with, that we live with, that we go to school with. But sometimes we need more understanding of why that's important. When I always say, well, that's what my company does because it's the right thing. But there are also, do you have to click it?
Yeah, just okay. You can tap.
Okay, but there are also other reasons that you can use to create the right environment, the environment that we all want to work in. To begin with, it's been shown that diversity and inclusion makes us more creative, both on the surface level where different people obviously bring different perspectives to whatever meetings, whatever projects it is we're working on, but also our ability to actually be more creative because we're around those people. So don't discount what we can learn from other people that starts changing our perspective, that allows us to start anticipating different viewpoints that we might be able to act on, and also to understand that consensus is hard. And to be able to come to the table knowing that other people have different viewpoints, I might need to change my viewpoint, and I'm going to need to work on consensus.
That won't work.
That won't work. Additionally, inclusivity makes us more creative. By having an inclusive group, we have another dynamic in the process, another way to bring out the culture and make people more open to new ideas and increase the collective intelligence of the group. Okay. And in addition, we become more effective. We have smarter teams, we have more creative ideas, we're representing more stakeholders, and there's also some more financial success that could lead to a healthier organizational culture. The study that we were looking at, the McKinsey study, said that companies in the top quartile for gender and race, gender or racial ethnicity diversity are more likely to have financial returns above the national median. Okay, and this isn't a causality, this is a correlation. So organizations that have more diversity tend to have greater financial return. It doesn't lead to having greater financial return. But what we believe is that these kinds of companies are able to win top talent better. They're able to improve their customer orientation, employee satisfaction, and decision making. So all of those lead to better financial gains by having diverse groups.
And by the way, every study, anything you see, with, especially with years there, we have a list of all the links at the end. So it'll be, you can get all that stuff. So let's get into understanding some of these issues a little bit better. One of my favorite people who has really explained, now there's lots of different kinds of privilege. White privilege is one that is probably one of the most dominant kinds. We can see it even here in this room. There's also male privilege, there's ableist privilege, there's American privilege. There's a wide range of different types. But Peggy McIntosh is a great thinker who really helped explore the area of white privilege, and that's a good framework to look at, but keep in mind it does apply to a lot of other things. So she talks about when she was, even when racism dawned upon her, because many white people grow up literally not knowing that racism is still a thing, and she was able to understand that there was some people who were at a disadvantage. Even then, she still didn't quite get that. That meant that she was also, the corollary, as she calls it, is that she is at an advantage. And a lot of people really don't think about that. And also, science fiction author John Scalzi, who's a great tweeter, he's very funny, you should follow him, wrote a blog post about imagine, because his audience, he was writing basically a post for an audience of like white gamer dudes, said, imagine there's a game called Real Life. And at the beginning of the game, you get to pick what difficulty setting you're playing the game on. There's a lot of challenges the game is going to throw at you. There's going to be monsters and demons, and you might be good at something, and you might be bad at something. But at the very beginning of the game, you're getting assigned the lowest possible difficulty level of straight white male. It doesn't mean that you're going to win the game automatically, right? So it's an interesting framework, and I find it useful for him because he's talking to a particular audience that sometimes has a lot of trouble understanding. Privilege isn't about guilt or blame, right? It's about recognizing that there are whole systems at work. And it has a lot more to do with infrastructure than people's individual feelings. So we have to recognize it so that we can see that it's going on. And then we can think about, those of us who have various kinds of privilege can talk about how we use it. And for example, one of the things that Dori and I were talking about before this is, well, look at us. Not the most diverse couple of presenters here. Two straight, cis, white, Jewish women. And when you look at diversity initiatives in general in the tech world, you often find them dominated by white women. And it's not because diversity begins and ends with getting white women access to things, but we have at least some privilege that we can use to step up and be squeakier wheels and things like that. And so we have the ability to do some of this activism that might be more challenging for people in other positions. But so that's the kind of thing it's important for us to be aware of. Both we're using our privilege in this case to talk to people about it as white people, to talk to other white people, but also to be aware that there's other people who don't have the advantages that we have to even be able to be doing this sort of activist-y stuff. Now, since there are all these different issues, and again, it's a trap that a lot of times I see people fall into, is when they talk about diversity, they're really just thinking of women. And if they're not thinking about race, then they're really just thinking about white women, right? Because they're white and they see white as a default. But the great law professor, Kimberly Crenshaw, coined this term intersectionality actually back in the 80s. I wish I had known this term a lot sooner because I was reaching for it for a long time. But basically what she talks about is that if you talk about one, you're missing that there are all these other issues. And for example, if we don't recognize that there's also some intersecting LGBTQ issues with someone, then or race issues or class or education, then basically what we're doing is paving the way for white women to come into stuff, right? And not thinking about all those different angles. If, for example, we're only looking at gender. There's other folks who only look at race. But the point is, any of us need to move along together, because if we don't look at it intersectionally, then we're only advancing this one little silo, and we're not really causing like a more fair or increasing the amount of justice by just doing this one thing at a time. We definitely don't want to leave people behind. As a woman, I don't want to leave women of color behind, for example. So I have to think about more than just how things affect me. And the great Audre Lorde, who I just have been reading recently, I've been rereading a little bit recently, has one of the best lines. There are no single issue struggles because we don't live single issue lives, right? Like all of us bring these different intersecting issues, in all kinds of different ways. And so it's important when we do this diversity stuff not to think about only one thing and say, we're just going to do the women, and then, we'll do race later or something like that. So a lot of people think that what we really need to do is just be more tolerant. And this is where it comes to the personal stuff. People say, well, I'm not racist and I'm not sexist, so everything's cool, and I don't need to change anything about the way I do things. But the fact is, tolerance is not enough. And although tolerance is important, for sure, but it's not enough, and sometimes, especially when it gets to the community scale of things, like here in Drupal, there are times when certain influences or people who are intolerant actually need to be excluded from the community for the entire community to actually be able to be successfully tolerant. So I made this very simple Venn diagram. But I also wanted to mention, my friend Greg wrote a great Medium post about this last year. You're not on the slide, sorry, but you are in the notes. So I do recommend reading that. And it might have been you that turned me on to this guy who wrote in the 1940s about the paradox of tolerance. And I mean, maybe I think it's obvious because the Venn diagram is so simple. But I'm not even just talking about like Nazis, although some people like to use that because it's the obvious example that explains the paradox, right? Like if your community is inclusive of Nazis or of outwardly racist people, then that's obviously not going to be a welcoming place for others who those folks don't want to be there, or even who those folks just don't like, period. But it really goes much more beyond that. Because there are cultures of sexism and racism within the Drupal community, within the tech world in general. And so we have to think about how we respond to those. There isn't room for everybody, basically. Feel free to jump in. Okay, what are we talking about? Oh, yeah. Okay, so human beings. Every single one of us has values. And another way to say values is bias. Right? You value your family. I'll explain that garbage on the left in a minute. It doesn't even make sense, but I will explain it. Everybody has values. You love your family. You love beautiful art. You hate clowns. You love well-documented code. All those things are values that you hold, if you hold those. Those are also biases. So there's nobody who's actually a truly objective, like human being. Every human being has values and biases. And guess who makes software? Human beings. Even if the software is made by other software, that software was made by a human being. So we are always putting our values and biases into the code that we make, even if we don't think we are. And we usually don't think we are. We never think we are. But there are so many examples. And another one is the soap dispenser that didn't see darker skin, right? Like, because they didn't even think to test that. So on the left is a picture of part of the training tool for Facebook moderators. And the people who created the Facebook moderation policies basically said hate speech can't be against a whole category like black women or white men. But if people are speaking about a subcategory like women drivers, that's not hate speech. I can't understand. So in their quiz, if you're training to be a Facebook moderator, in this answer, it says, I can't quite read the text, which of these subsets do we protect? Women drivers? No. Black children? No. White men? Yes. This is like not even like an accident that came up. This is like in their training materials. So this is from a study by ProPublica. We have a link to that information. So again, people, and someone came to that thinking that they were some great like philosophical guru, everyone is equal and blah, blah, blah. Everyone's not equal. We always build our biases into our software. So it's so important for us to always be thinking about that. Okay. I keep hitting the wrong one.
Okay, so one of the ways that the tech community is trying to show that we can do better at building software is through the concept of inclusive design. I saw Michael Sue at an event apart a couple weeks ago, And he defined inclusive design as a practice of consciously designing experiences that foster belonging. And I thought that was probably the best definition of inclusive design that I have ever heard. It's about the fact that we're designing for the majority and that there's no normal user. But if you think of like a bell curve, we're designing just for the middle of it. And the further out we go to include more people, the more inclusive our software will be. And we get more robust solutions that way because we get solutions that address varying perspectives, varying cultures, varying ideas. So when we make the environment, we're all makers here, we make the environment, and because of our biases, we cause a mismatch between who we are and what we're providing, what we're making, and what people are consuming. So having a larger inclusive group allows us to take other people into consideration. And what they're doing at Airbnb is they're actually, and they're known for not being inclusive. So they brought Michael in as their lead designer. And they're actually recreating how they put their software together, how their screens look, how the language they use, the colors they use, how the software interacts with people, all from an inclusive perspective. And he is nonstop working at changing the entire culture at Airbnb, which is long overdue, and I'm thrilled to have gotten to know him. One of the things about inclusive design is that understanding diversity starts to inform the decisions that you make when you're designing software. And you then start designing for as many people as possible. I love the design philosophy from Aeon. This watch is the result of their latest inclusive design efforts. And you can see it's not a watch that has Braille on it, that's kind of an add-on after the fact, so that somebody with a visual disability can read it. It's actually a watch that anybody can tell time with. But it's very inclusive. And their concept is that you don't want to be reactive and add things on to the software that we're doing. And we all know that we do a lot of accessibility work on our websites, and I'm not saying that needs to go away. But what I'm saying is we need to start thinking ahead of time as we're developing that software so that the barriers don't exist in the first place, coming up with designs that are more inclusive to begin with. Did you want to?
Oh, no, this is you.
Yeah, okay. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the data that we found and how our community stacks up globally and nationally to some data. I do want to stress that these are not random samples. So the two surveys that we looked at were Stack Overflow and GitHub. And while they both had many thousands of respondents, which is excellent, they were still self-identified respondents. So they were still people who said, I wish to respond. So we don't have any national numbers where somebody did a properly weighted survey. And I've been in survey research for almost 20 years of my career. So I don't want to say I want to take this data with a grain of salt. It does show a lot of interesting observations, but let's not say that this is the accuracy of what we see going on in the world. This one is gender identity. You can see that what I did here is that the arrows that point up show that we have a larger number of people in the tech space in that category than we see globally or through the US population. So, the male-female split we know is about 50-50. It holds up whether you're using the World Bank data or whether you're using any US data. But what we're seeing in the open source community and in the web space in particular is upwards of 90% male. Okay? So, that that is not a representative number. And of course, we therefore see the representation of females to be significantly lower. And heaven forbid we have any data on the LGBTQ population. There is very little data nationally or globally, so this is another problem that we need to fix, is understanding what our diversity actually looks like. But because of discrimination, bullying, violence, more or less different in different countries, maybe a little better here, but maybe not, but certainly a lot worse in a lot of countries in the Middle East and other places where there is no way to be openly yourself. We're seeing that people have lower education outcomes, higher unemployment rates, lack of adequate housing and health and financial services, and these do play into who gets to play in the tech space. So if you don't get that education, you don't get to play. Okay?
Should do it.
Yeah. So in addition, we know that women are also supporting their kids a lot more. The data does show that women are still doing more unpaid labor as childcare supporters, as supporters of the elderly. So when you go home from work, you're not contributing back to the community. You're taking care of a kid. You're taking care of a parent. The time available to different people of different backgrounds is different. And we have to accept that we're not all going to have that free time at night to start participating in the community. The next numbers we looked at were this participation. This was a wonderful study by the open source opensourcesurvey.org. And they looked at different factors on how men and women relate to the open source community. And the open source community has a history of being aggressive. And women do not like that kind of space. Women of any race or ethnicity do not like an aggressive space to work in. We've all had, as women, negative interactions in the open source community. And this shows that when there is a code of conduct or a welcoming community, women tend to want to be involved more. So when we start thinking about that, when I put out something on D.O that says, wait, this use case wasn't quite right, I really feel hurt when a bunch of developers come back at me and say, sorry, that's the one we used. There needs to be something more. There needs to be a dialogue. Maybe saying, oh, can you explain a little more why you don't think that's right? Start having a dialogue. So the hostility that a lot of groups experience in the open source space actually keeps us out of contributing. By race and ethnicity, we see in the data exactly what we expected to see. Again, white, European descent, male, people, and it probably aligns very well with the male community when we're talking about intersectionality. But again, they are way overrepresented from the surveys that we saw, and we see that the Hispanic and what they called Black or African descent in the Stack Overflow survey, because that was an international survey, what we would call African American in our surveys. We didn't have a survey here in the US that fit this, so I used the BLS data. And you could see that based on the census data, if you're not white, you're not represented in the web space. You're just not there. When I just spoke about women being caregivers, well, African American women, women of color in the US, are way more likely to have to go home and be caregivers. and they don't have the time to be contributing back to the community. How do we make that time? Do we say that, gee, you do that on your own time? Or do we say to the employers, gee, part of contributing to a community is allowing your employees to contribute during work hours? Because we don't all have that time after work that we can do this. People with longer commute times are negatively impacted by having time and having the money to freely contribute to an open source community. And then we looked at disability status, which was extremely difficult. There just doesn't seem to be a lot of data. GitHub didn't address it at all, which I thought was horrific. We have problems at all our cons with people who can't get around, and we don't do a whole lot for them. In this venue last year, we had to do a lot of begging to get people handicap tags and access to the lot that's behind here. Believe it or not, there is a lot. And it was pretty much empty because nobody knew how to get to the people who could give them the tags. And then there's one elevator in this building. And it is on, we are as far away from that elevator as you can be. It's way on the other side, past balcony A, and you have 15 minutes to get from one session to the next. And people can say, well, that's long enough. Okay, well, what if you need to use the restroom? Okay, well, maybe you're late. Okay, what about the woman I saw at DrupalCon, who I had friended during training, and she was standing in front of the registration desk on day 2 and said to me, I think I need to go back to my hotel because I'm absolutely exhausted from going back and forth to the elevator and I can't pay attention anymore, my body hurts. My heart broke when she said that, because venues aren't designed, they think they're designed for the disabled, but they're not. And even if there's nothing we can do about that now, I mean, a building that exists, we know the funds and the money and the consensus that would take to change this, but maybe we can change our conferences a little. How about saying, gee, let's add some time between sessions. Hey, let's make sure there's space by the door for somebody who comes in late because they had trouble getting to the session, instead of closing them out of the session when it gets full, because they're not sitting on the floor. So just start thinking of creative ways we can work around the problems in our environment, even though our problems that we caused and they're not inclusive. We found that in this study, they said there are over 500,000 agencies worldwide, a good portion of which are digital agencies building websites, and collectively we have the potential to make a big difference in web accessibility for disabled users. We have the opportunity as consultants. Clients rely on us. We're making those decisions as to what goes in the software, and using everything we have, from analytics to our understanding of the data, to be able to create good user experiences for the disabled community, for other communities that need representation. And that should be our job and our focus.
So anybody who's been involved with the Drupal community has probably heard of Angie Buyer, if not met her or interacted with her. I found an amazing blog post that she wrote actually 10 years ago, laying out what she considered the Drupal community philosophies. And one of the things she was talking about was everybody's got opinions about how things should be done. And if you look, at the tickets, you'll see people saying, do it this way, do it this way. There's no lack of opinions about how to do things, but it's the people who actually do it that actually influence how the things are going to get done, both because they're doing the work and not just sitting in the peanut gallery, although I want to give a cheer for the peanut gallery sometimes, it's really important, but also because those people gain more and more respect and influence in the community because of their doing things and because of their stepping up. So it's part of the culture of Drupal that it is a do-ocracy, and when you see a problem, you're supposed to step up and deal with it. And so that is what we did. 2 years ago at DrupalCon in New Orleans, Nikki Stevens and Karen, I'm forgetting her last name, did a great presentation about diversity. It was the first time, I'm pretty sure, anything like that had been done, at least at the national or international con level. And it started a conversation, which led to a BOF, which led to us starting a group. I'm going to talk a little more now about the whole group itself. So I'm not going to get into it too much right here, but that's Nikki. She's our patron saint. Okay. So as I said earlier, there are so many different kinds of privilege or different kinds of discrimination, different kinds of issues. I hate listing them. I hate slides like this. There's no way to include all of the different issues. But we felt it was important to list some of this so that people didn't fall in, again, to that trap of thinking, well, we're only talking about gender or gender identity or race or something like that. We do take a really broad view, and these are all different issues that we are concerned with. And basically any issues that are marginalizing people based on just their identity or facts of their life. So, going to our sort of origin story, as I said, started at DrupalCon New Orleans. We started meeting in IRC and Slack, but there was just a lot more momentum in Slack. And so we have a channel in the Drupal Slack, which I highly recommend the Drupal Slack to everybody. Go to drupal.org/Slack to find out about it. And there's channels for like everything in there. There's support channels, and there's front end and back end, and people using this host helping each other figure things out, every little thing. And we have a diversity and inclusion channel there in the Slack, which is a great place to go and ask questions, to meet, to talk with other people who are interested in this stuff, share resources. Anyway, Nikki spoke, was keynoted at DrupalCon, or at DrupalCamp Costa Rica. We finally got our website and Twitter account together. We consulted with the DA a little bit with the Drupal Association on DrupalCon Baltimore. Also last year we formed one of our best projects, I'll talk about in a minute, the DDI Contrib team. When you see DDI, a lot of times we abbreviate Drupal Diversity and Inclusion. So that's what we mean by DDI. It just means us. We're not like a working group or initiative or whatever, we just are DDI. Because we couldn't decide what we wanted to be, basically. We moved our issue queue from GitHub to Drupal.org late last year. Worked with the DA again on Nashville. We helped host a lot of the BOFs and things like that. Earlier this year, Nikki, who is doing a lot of different things right now, passed on the torch of leadership to Fatima Khalid. So she's now the head of our group. We have a whole leadership team. I thought I had a slide about that, but I don't think it's in there anymore. So let me just say real quickly, I don't know what happened to that one. There are 8 members of our leadership team. Greg is another one. I am one. It is, 3 men and 5 women, and 7 of us are white. So we have a lot of room to improve on as well. But to the extent that there's any official decision-making thing, it's us, the leadership team. So Fatima is in charge of the leadership team, and there were DDI Contrib sprints at Nashville, and we've got another one coming up, which I will talk about in a minute. One of the things we did in Baltimore is we started having a table, and we've got a photo booth. We take people's pictures and we post them all on our Instagram and Twitter with the hashtag #WeAreDrupal to really highlight the diversity of the community, or the lack thereof, whatever it is, that's our community. So I'm just going to run down this list of the different things that we are doing as a group. And I'm going to try to go quickly because we do want questions, but we're near the end. So in that Slack channel, we have weekly meetings. They're every Thursday at 12 o'clock Eastern. And that's when you can kind of drop in and get a sense of the whole thing of what else is going on. You can meet some of the other people in the channel. A lot of people I've met in Slack, I'm just meeting for the first time in person. Yep. Taryn, lots of people. So it's a really great community. In fact, so much so that we had to spin off some other channels. So we have a DDI chat channel where we can just go off. But our Slack channels are actually really important because they have provided a safe space for talking about these issues, which doesn't really exist anyplace else in the Drupal community. And when stuff goes down, which it sometimes does, we have been a place where people can have conversations about it that are informed by this intersectional perspective. So the DDI Contrib team is an opportunity for people to actually contribute to Drupal and get mentored, or an opportunity for people to do some mentoring. And one of their main projects is the gender field module. I was thinking about it a lot when you were talking about all the statistics, because we really lack a lot of statistics, especially about the Drupal community, because for the most part, till recently, it hadn't been asked for. And even now, when it gets asked for, sometimes it's not asked for in the most effective way. For example, the tallying of people here in these sessions is male or female, but you can't really tell from looking at somebody all the time, can you? So how good is that data? So the gender field module sort of gets at some of that from an interface perspective. It also reminds people to think about whether they actually do need to collect that data. But you can see from when we're talking about this stuff, you can actually see the value of collecting the data. So it depends on if you actually need it. But DDI Contrib is doing lots of other stuff, and they've got a virtual Contrib day coming up September 1st. They're working on our website, which needs to be beautified. One of the further down bullets is the online resources. And I mentioned that because DDI Contrib is going to work and make the interface for that better, because the resource library is actually really awesome. But it's just a plain old like Drupal, or rather views with exposed filters and stuff. It can be a lot easier to use, so they can work on improving that stuff too. We have pronoun stickers, and by the way, we have some right over here. And we really encourage you to add pronoun stickers to your name tag, which means if you identify as a male, you can just put one on that says, "Hi, my pronouns are he, his." And that really just normalizes the process of people sharing their pronouns, and also of respecting that people have their choice of what pronouns they want to be referred to by. Some people want to be they. Some people don't like to be referred to with a pronoun at all. We have all of those options here. And even for a cisgender woman like myself, I'm a person. I'm lucky. I've never questioned. I've always felt like a woman. I was born this way, and I can still put that. I put that on my name tag. This doesn't hurt me a bit. And it helps normalize that to make the community inclusive for people who aren't like me. So please put a gender or put a pronoun on your name tag. As I said, we facilitate a lot of the BOFs, although we are very happy for other people to step up and do those things. But it's hard to find those people, so we do that. When requested, we provide advice and feedback to community leaders. Frankly, we would like to be consulted about a lot more things by the Drupal Association and stuff like that. And we have this whole brilliant team that is diverse in some ways and would love to share feedback. So these are some of the ways to get involved. I think I've probably already talked about all of these. We have our weekly meetings. We have an issue queue on Drupal.org of things that we're doing. You can add stuff to the resource library. Anybody can add to it. Follow us on Twitter. Join the Contrib team. And if you feel like, well, I'm not an expert on diversity or whatever, that's fine. Everybody has a part to play in this. And if you drop into the channel and just hang out there and participate, number one, you'll learn more about these issues, and number two, you'll see where your perspectives are actually useful. We sometimes get questions. I'm only going to answer this because we get this question. People will say, well, I'm a white guy. I don't belong in this stuff. This isn't for me. But actually, we very much need white guys who aren't facing a lot of problems like that, because you're the ones who can talk to your allies, talk to people like you. And because of all this discrimination, we really don't get listened to very much. So we very much need you and want you to participate. So finally, questions, ideas that have come up for you, things that I went too fast at the beginning. I really went fast, yes.
I did just want to say that if you decide to join the DDI chat room, okay, so hi, I'm Taryn. Some of y'all might know me as 9 Lives Black Cat. That's me, that's in there. But if you decide to join the Drupal chat, you don't just have to join it because you have something to contribute. If you just want to stay and listen, sometimes that helps out a lot too, because then you learn stuff from it. So, yeah.
So just to repeat that, in case people didn't hear, it's okay to just stay and listen in the Slack channel. You don't have to participate. And over time, you might want to, or maybe you just want to bring information back, and that's okay with us. We also have a table downstairs that we didn't mention. It's got flyers for the Contrib Day. It's got some postcards that give you all the Slack channel information. And we're manned during, we're staffed during all of the breaks and lunch. So if you have any other questions, come on down and join us there too. Yes?
Excuse me, my name is Frank. I'm from West Africa. I'm sorry, my English is not very good because I'm speaking French. And when I hear about the diversity and inclusion, I think that this concerns our country also, because we are in French-speaking country, and it seems that we are in a big war that people don't know about us. It's my thought. In our country, we have many people who are trying to do Drupal, but we meet a barrier of language between us and the rest of the world. This is why I come every time I can to participate in Drupal event and to speak to people to help us to be a part of this big community. And for example, to come here, I have no scholarship, and I take money from body, and I will work 1 month to pay them back their money. And I do it just to come here and to speak about our country and West African people who are speaking French and also want to do Drupal.
Yeah.
What is it? So it's very interesting to speak about diversity and inclusion for Drupal. Training, we have a problem of training in Africa, in West Africa. We have a problem of to communicate with the rest of the community because we are using French. This is the big barrier. What we can do to help to these people who are speaking French and who are black people also,
Wow.
and to integrate this community really. We have many things to do in the technology side in our country to develop. For example, I cannot buy pizza online in my country using web services. There are many things to do, and we are trying to fight to tell people we are there, what we can do for us. And most of the time when I spend my time to come to Europe and United States, people take me like a madman because I'm spending my money to fight for this community, to do them. We exist also, but there is nothing what is done to help us.
Yeah, that is such a good point. I mean, that's a challenge on the internet in general. So much is done in English, and that doesn't include everybody. I don't have an easy solution for that. I mean, one of the things I like about Drupal is it does internationalization in general of websites better than most tools do. But we haven't been thinking that much about language inclusion even ourselves. So I think that's a really good reminder.
Yeah, I would say that one of the best things you can do is just bring the awareness up. I'm the same way. Like
Yes.
I lived in Europe. I lived in Sweden for a long time, and even there, the language barrier didn't come up because they're all taught English from the time they're little children, and so even there, like I could speak English everywhere, and they code in English and comment in English and everything. So it's like even living overseas myself, I had never really thought of that issue. So even just raising that awareness and knowing it and bringing it up to people can help us think more about it as we move forward.
Yes? Okay.
Well, we appreciate that you're here. We don't think you're a madman. We think you're a hero.
Yes.
And we appreciate the fact that you brought this to our attention because it really isn't on our radar, and to be able to bring this into the general community is an excellent idea.
One thing that would be great is if you actually would, if you want to join our channel in the Drupal Slack, and you can be there to remind us, like when we're talking about all these things, like don't forget, what about this, and what about, I think Taryn has some thoughts too.
Taryn's just joined you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say in response to that question, I believe Google has a language translator that you can actually put any web page into and it'll translate it into many different languages.
Kind of.
And the big problem is that sometimes it doesn't recognize the words, especially when we're talking tech.
Right.
And
But
context.
it will learn if you teach it the words and the translation, then it adds that to its lexicon. So you could try that translating.
So that's a good suggestion, taking advantage of Google's Translate services. And what that's reminding me is that we should do that on our own website, like on the Drupal Diversity website. We can add a tool. The problem is those translations, as you said, they lack context and they don't get technical terms. But it's better than nothing.
But
It does remove the real-time communication stuff, which is where so much of our community
Correct.
happens. Even
Yeah.
in the Slack channel, so much of that interaction, which brought all of us together, happens in real time, and that doesn't
Yeah.
help.
But even in Slack, you could copy it and go paste it
sure,
into
yeah,
Google
I-
Translate and come back.
But
I do
don't
that
forget,
sometimes.
there's access problems also around the world. So, like, I have a client whose audience is in China, and you can't get anything Google related in China. So, and I'm sure that's true in other places in the world. I don't know if Slack might be. We don't know what tools are being allowed in the firewalls of different countries as well. So.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And like a website that I'm working on at work right now has actual professionals translating it into like 8 different languages,
Right.
and we'll have those
Far
different
better
versions
solution.
of it. Yeah, when you can do that, it's good. Yeah.
One of the problems that I also want to discuss is not really the fact to use the technology, but the possibility to give our point of view on some solution and to contribute, also to participate to events. If we can create a kind of bridge between these people who are speaking French and people who are speaking English, we can have a place to collect information and point of view on such solution that
Right.
can be interesting for all people.
That's a good idea.
When I see the table of diversity that you show, I didn't see barrier of language. I
Yep.
didn't see
Right.
African people. This kind of thing can help.
You're right.
In my country, people have solution for problem that the community needs, but they cannot express themselves. If we can create a kind of tradition, and I don't know how to call it, but a bridge to collect the idea of these also people.
So like a French language Drupal community. There might even be something like that on groups.drupal.org.
But to be able to include them into our community.
Yeah, I mean, it's
That's
a great
what the
point.
bridge is.
And you're completely
Yeah.
right that we left language off there and shouldn't have. Like, you're totally right.
Yes.
We didn't think of it.
Yeah.
You're
But
totally right.
there's no data available from the web community as to distribution of language. So the data is not even there to collect. I mean, certainly we can do worldwide data, but we've got nothing to compare it to. And so it's a similar problem with some of the other statistics that you saw. Yeah.
Cool.
And, excuse me to
We do have to wrap up soon.
For example, for the scholarship, we have problem to achieve scholarship. I don't want a kind of favoritism, but if we can have 1 or 2 scholarships a year for people who live there to come and see, they can also open their mind.
There are. That actually does
DrupalCon,
exist. The
yes.
DrupalCon, there are scholarships, and I was on the team that reviewed them one year. And frankly, more people should apply for those. But there were a number of applicants from Africa and from India, for example.
But those people speak English. And
So
I'm
to take
speaking
that into
about
account,
West Africa,
yeah.
French people who don't have a notion of English, but they have good programmer also, and
Yeah,
they
yeah.
can come.
We would
Yeah.
definitely provide
And
that
kind of,
feedback.
on 1 year or 2 years to encourage people to meet the community and to exchange. That can be helpful for us also.
Very good.
Thank you. We
Yes.
really have to wrap up soon. But these are all really good points, and I'm really glad that you raised it.
We will take
very,
that.
Very
We
glad.
will take that advice back.
Are there any other questions or comments about stuff? Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to cover that a little bit, but somebody asked me about Slack, and I'm not familiar with it. Can you just explain what that is? And
Okay.
Is it just Drupal?
No, Slack is basically a team communication tool. It's especially useful for remote workplaces or distributed communities. It's a free tool. You download it onto your desktop. You can also use it through the web browser, and you can also use it on mobile. They have apps for mobile. It's slack.com to find out about that. But actually, I would go to drupal.org/slack. Because then they explain it, and they have the link where you have to just register to join the Drupal Slack. And you should check it out. There's lots of different channels. There's a Women in Drupal channel in the Drupal Slack. There's a nonprofits channel. There's support. Like I said, front end, back end, every little thingies that you're into.
It's group text or instant messenger on steroids.
Yeah. Yes. It's a massive group instant messaging thing. It's a great community. It's been incredible for me, certainly. Like just to learn more about Drupal, to get connected in the community, to find my people. It's really, really helpful.
Yeah, it's not limited to Drupal. My office uses it. Lots of workplaces use it. It's a means to collaborate through distributed groups.
Yeah.
If you use IRC, it's sort of like the 21st century version of that.
So we are out of time.
We thank you.
Thank you so much. I really want to recognize especially the work of Nikki and Paul Schulzetenberg and Dori actually did so much of the work on this presentation. And Paul's not even here, and he helped make this happen. So
Yes,
we
he
so
did.
appreciate
He was wonderful.
all the many people who contributed to this. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.